And welcome back to Taxation is Theft, the show that talks about all the ways the government is ripping you off and what you can do to stop them. Broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube from an underground bunker deep within the jungles of Mexico. I'm Dan, Taxation is Theft Berman, former candidate for president of the United States, currently in the race for governor of Texas. And today we have an awesome guest, Britt from the Fab Show. She is a mom and a child's rights advocate. I know, my tongue is always twisted. She's also a minarchist with lots of friends in various sex work industries. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about all about sex work, whether or not it's good or bad, whether or not it should be legalized. It's going to be an interesting conversation. You can find her on Twitter at Tweets by Brit. But before we get started, if you're watching the live stream, please remember to like and share and comment and ask your questions. Drop your comments in. This is going to be a really interesting one because we are going to be talking about sex work, which is highly controversial. And even though Britt and I kind of like met by bumping heads because we disagreed on one particular thing, we actually found out that we agree on a lot of it. So to bring some more controversy into this, we need your comments really, really bad. Put in your comments. Tell us why we're wrong so we can tell you why we're right. And tonight's episode is brought to you by Nugg of Knowledge, indoor-grown, chemical-free, smokable hemp flower and Delta-8 vape cartridges, legal in all 50 states. Get elevated at nuggofknowledge.com. And now, on to the show. Britt, welcome.
Hi.
How's it going?
Put me on. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. So should we start with the elephant in the room, or should we kind of work up to that?
No, let's start with it. Let's
okay. So I think the question was, because as a and I don't like to wear labels, but let's say as a voluntarist, I like to say the government should not be criminalizing any kind of sex work. And of course, the issue of the border came up, sex trafficking, the children in cages at the border and all this other stuff. And the real issue of people trafficking children to be used as sex slaves and this sort of thing, which even in an anarchist society, I think anarchists agree that's a terrible thing and those people are criminals and they need to be dealt with, just not by writing laws on paper and then figuring out some way to enforce it, just a different way. Some of them say wood chippers. I don't know. Results may vary. But what's interesting is I think I said something about if we legalize sex work, we would probably reduce the amount of harm that comes to children through sex trafficking and that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of where we disagreed a little bit. Is that right?
We do disagree a little bit on that. But the tweet that I responded to was that somebody had asked you if you ran and you won, they had asked you about a case where a minor was solicited for sex by an adult, and you said that black markets don't ask for ID. And that's what made me cringe so much. I was like, because here's the thing. Sex work and molestation are different things. Sex work and raping a child are different things. So we can't have the conversation about, honestly, about adults having sex work if we're somehow conflating that that sort of thing wouldn't happen if sex work was legal. So that's really where I took issue with it. I was like, right. This is not this is
well,
not.
I can see that. And you're right. And to a degree, I think a lot of this comes from, we have the media that's pushing the narrative that all sex work is sex trafficking, which is total bullshit. But this is what the mainstream pushes, right? And because of that, I think a lot of people, when you talk about any kind of sex work, it's like, well, some of them are children. And it's like, yeah, but you don't go, for example, you have strip clubs, which are legal, and you have girls working there, but because they're legal, they're out in the open, they're not hiding anything, they're checking for IDs. And there aren't very many cases of girls working in those places who are underage.
In the United States. So there's 150 countries that have legalized or decriminalized sex work. And after those countries legalized or decriminalized sex work, almost every single one of them saw an increase in human trafficking and child exploitation in regards to sexual activity, which I don't think you can have sexual activity with a child, you can only rape them and molest them. So I hate to even use the terminology that there's sex work for children, because there's not. There's raping of children for pay. So,
Right.
but that's not what I'm here to discuss, because that's going to happen no matter what. I mean, I could say, parents that have alcohol in the home are more likely to have children that drink that alcohol that's in the home. Do we think we should ban liquor? No, that's not what we're here to discuss. Unless we are, but I think we'd agree. What I was, again, here to talk about is conflating the two issues. And as I'm a minarchist, so I guess that puts, I just say like liberty-minded person. I think that puts us in a category of things where we often have to say, is this safer for women? Probably not. We show, there's been a lot of studies like the London Institute of Psychology, I think, did a study, and science.com has a study. There's different places you can go. But adults should be able to do things that are dangerous no matter what. Like, you're an adult, you should be able to make those decisions. Children, things are going to be dangerous for kids, and it's our job as parents and as adults and people that see children and want to advocate for them to protect them from those things. So what I really want to change, the best way that I can see, is to not conflate the two. To say, like, look, these are two separate things. And if we're seeing, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls working at a strip club when they're not supposed to be, or 16, 14, 15, 16, 12, 10, 9 young girls are being, put out for prostitution and sex work. These are things that I actually believe that we should come down extremely hard on, so that there isn't a market for it anymore, so that it is so ridiculously unprofitable to do this to children that's how we stop it. And then we could, I don't care if we flood the market with grown adults that are having sex for pay. I really don't. I could care less what adults do. As long as it's consensual, I really don't. It's just the conflation that really, really bothers me. And I think a lot of people will hopefully understand like where I'm coming from on this.
Right. No, I think that's an interesting point. And I guess, I guess what I was trying to say is, okay, so I get your point, right? Let's say you have a 17-year-old who goes to a strip club with a fake ID and says, I want to work here. That's totally different than if, somebody is kidnapped and then taken there and forced to work. Which is, I guess that's, of course they're not going to be checking for ID if you're being kidnapped. I think what, to me, it seems like is, for when you have these like really sketchy markets, like you have like, the Craigslist and like these types of places where, we hear there are people being trafficked and sold on these websites. There's because even like the legit sex workers are in the same place, they're marketing in the same place. It seems like, I would think somebody who goes to those websites to buy sex they're not going to be checking for IDs. They're not going to be asking the question, are you engaged in this voluntarily, or have you been kidnapped, and I don't think, I mean, for one, I'm guessing a customer, that's probably not where their head is at regardless. But I think like, taking that out of that negative space, and, like, let's say you go to like Nevada where prostitution is legal, and you go to like, the Bunny Ranch or like, whatever, there's like those brothels that they have. You don't go in there and even question that any of those people are being held there against their will, because I would think, the same way as like you don't go to a McDonald's and say, okay, how many of these employees are being held here against their will, right? It's like it has the facade of just an ordinary business, and so those questions don't come to mind. Versus like, when it's, and I don't know, maybe I'm kind of agreeing with your point. Because when you have a black market, it's like, I would think there is kind of like, the don't ask thing, right? Like nobody ever asks their weed dealer, like, hey, did you steal this weed or did you grow it yourself? Or like, things like this. There's never that question of, did you get this legitimately? It's just kind of like, don't ask, don't tell, no questions. I'm here for one thing, and let's just deal with it that way. So I don't know, but maybe there might be some better data that says whether or not that's the case.
So there is. And if you go to catwinternational.org, you can actually see there's a whole study that they show. It's actually a paper that they did that shows all these different studies. It's called 10 Reasons for Not Legalizing Prostitution. And again, as I've stated, I'm not against it, although you're starting to make the case that it might actually be a good idea to keep it criminalized. I don't know if you meant to, but when you kept saying a weed dealer or somebody that's soliciting a prostitute is not asking for ID, first of all, most people aren't doing that. Like if I'm going into a bar, if my ID's checked, then I'm not making sure that the alcohol wasn't like bought illegally or anything like that. So you're not really thinking about it either way. I could understand.
Right. You have like a false sense of
Yeah.
security about it.
So as a
Right. So,
consumer,
mhm.
I would think if you're entering a black market, yeah, you're asking a lot more questions. I know, at least for me, like not with weed because you can kind of tell, but other drugs that I've done, yeah, I sure as hell made. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss or anything because
Yeah, absolutely.
uh, I've definitely made sure like, oh, is this what I'm getting? Because I've done drugs that aren't weed. That if I messed up, then I'm not going home that night. So I think from a consumer point of view, maybe you are a little more likely to be a little more skeptical if something's already sketchy. As a business owner, then on the other end of it, yeah, you have a lot more responsibility on your shoulders if you are now the owner of a brothel, if you're the owner of, any sort of sex institute. What would it be called if sex work was legal? You know, I know the term, but I'm not going to use it. But like, you know what I mean? Like as a business owner, yeah, you have a responsibility at that point to make sure that everybody has a 1095 form or whatever and their ID, and that the people that are coming in to have sex with your workers are of the legal age that we've decided. So on that end, yes. As on a consumer end, I don't know. And then again, if you go back to like uh, catwinternational.com or .org, they talk about women in like Dutch women had they did a study with Dutch women and women from New Zealand, and they found that there was kind of like a double-edged sword thing that happens when you legalize sex work. So what happens is there's more women from other and men too, but let's just use women for this argument because sex work is largely made up of women. More women from other areas do come in, they flood the market. So you would think that there was no reason to like have sex trafficking. However, sex trafficking also went up. A huge demand for sex trafficking went up in these areas. And so they should cancel each other out, right? There's all these legal sex workers, so we don't need the ones that have been kidnapped, except it didn't cancel it out. It actually made the problem worse. Again, I'm just giving this information out. I'm still not saying it should be illegal because adults that engage in uh, dangerous activities, there's consequences to that. And we need to kind of work on the problem of like, if everything's going to be legal, like how do we protect people that are kidnapped and sex trafficked and children that would be in this industry? Like that, I think is really where we need to focus on, because um, adults are going to do what adults are going to do. It's not like if you go into, I live in Los Angeles, and so I'm
Oh,
guessing
sorry.
it's probably more, I know.
I grew up there.
I know it's probably, I would say not as sketchy as some places, but I could still go to like a strip club in LA and have sex in the back room. Like it's not like it's not happening. So again, I'm not saying like, oh, we shouldn't decriminalize. I'm saying the things that are on the other end of this, the bad that it brings. One, we can't pretend it's not going to happen. We can't pretend that like, oh, it's going to make everything better, because people that are people that are sex trafficking and doing these things, they're not going to be like, oh, it's legal now, let me get myself a business license. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I
Right, right.
think we need to focus a conversation on like, well, we want to do this, so what can we do on the other end of it? And I know there's a lot of libertarians and liberty minded people that are like, who cares, not my problem. Like, so that's also something that you have every right to do, and just be like, I don't care. I just want everything to be legal. I don't care how dangerous it is. I don't care what happens to kids. I don't care what happens to women. I don't care. Or you can say like, yeah, I think we should make this legal, but probably we should worry about maybe this a little bit and try and find solutions for it.
Right. Well, and I want to talk to that for a second. And then I have another point. I'm trying to keep track of all these points in my head. So, like,
Right.
you bring up a good point, right? The reason, okay, well, some people just hate the government and they're like, anything the government does is bad, right?
Yeah.
Other people will say, okay, criminalizing sex work is in itself a crime because you're taking innocent consenting adults and you're putting them in prison. They don't belong to be there.
I agree with
Or they don't. I don't know if I just made a coherent sentence. So
I thought
they
so.
don't belong there. So that in itself is a crime. Now, for somebody to say, now that's a crime, and people are going to be having sex, they're going to be cheating on their wives, they're going to be spreading diseases, all these other things. It's like, okay, yeah, those are bad things, but those aren't crimes. So I don't care about those. But to say, oh, but then there's going to be more children who are brought up in this, to say I don't care about that, well, that is a crime. And so if you're against, like, I know you hate the government, but if you're against what the government is doing because it's a crime, or if you hate the government because what they do is criminal, then you should also hate what is happening to these kids, because that is also criminal. And especially because it's kids. Like, I can take it if the government goes into my bank account and they steal like a few $100 from me, I'll survive. But if something happens to a kid where they're being sex trafficked and sold into like sex slavery, that's a much bigger deal, right? So we should look to that and still say, if we want to solve the problem of the fact that the government is running around committing crimes, we should also take interest in the fact that adults are running around committing crimes against children. But I want to bring up another example that I'm thinking about, and like, and I know this is often used like as a thing with black markets, right? So let's say you're dealing drugs and somebody robs you, you don't usually call the police, because when the police show up, they're going to say, oh, so you were selling weed and they ran off with your weed, so we're going to take you to jail because you just admitted to selling weed. And with the sex work thing, like, imagine you're shopping on Craigslist, you find a girl, you go meet up with her, and then you're like, she seems underage. Let me check her ID. Something suspicious here. I'm pretty sure she's a minor. Let me call the police. Then the police show up and say, oh, well, the girl's gone and you were soliciting sex online, so we're going to take you to jail because you just admitted to it. Which is, I think, an interesting scenario, because, I mean, hey, for all we know, there could be incentive for somebody to say like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go meet up with some of these girls. And if I happen to see, because I'm into it, and like, that's fine. And if I happen to see a minor, hey, I know a nice little biker gang that's going to come down and like, they'll find out who she's working for and they'll kick their asses. That's a potential scenario, right? But if it's illegal, then you kind of eliminate that cause. But what I'm wondering is, you say that the incidence of child sex trafficking has increased in some places where they have legalized it. I wonder if that's actually a reporting issue where, and I don't know, I can't say that it is or it isn't, but I wonder if that's a reporting issue. That's, there are more cases being reported because it is more out in the open and somebody's getting caught, like, that's a minor. I'm wondering if there's any of that goes into play with that.
So that's a good question, and that's something I thought about. And it's also part of the reason why my position is what it is that the two things that you mentioned is that actual adults that are just want to have sex and don't want to have sex with children will be able to like report these instances more. Obviously, there's always going to be unfortunately these
There's always going to be
horrible
criminals.
things that happen.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people that take advantage of that. So it's hard. It's like, it's not like I can dispute you on that, because I agree with you on that. I do think that somebody's more likely to be able to say like, hey, this is a child, can you check it out? Now, where I draw the line is I absolutely, under no circumstances whatsoever in the history of anything I've ever said, if I did say it by accident, I didn't mean it. I absolutely never, not once, believe that a child should ever be prosecuted or indicted on any charges of sex work ever. What now in Ancapistan, in any at any point should a child ever be held responsible or liable for these things. I think that what should happen when, if say all sex work was legalized for adults, and somebody did, call on a child or and say this happened, I think that if we had somebody that went and investigated, we found out who was putting this child up to it, or whether, why it was happening, but I don't believe that there should be any criminal any action taken against a child. I don't believe there should be any forced rehabilitation for children, because I think that those types of situations where CPS gets involved are just as ripe for child sexual molestation as non-government activities. But I do think that there needs to be something like a community that can come together and help. Unfortunately, that's where we seem to have a problem, is that we don't have communities of people that seem to want to help anymore. We seem to have communities of people that want either the government to have it, or they don't want the government involved, but also they don't want to be involved. So that's kind of where I feel like that's where I feel like I have to stand in the gap sometime, as a mother of two children, as somebody that is like, look, I've been in this situation where, parents under stress could not handle, the day-to-day like craziness that comes with having children. And I'm like, look, I will watch your kids. I will help you with that. I will find resources for you. I'm not going to call CPS on you. I'm not going to call the police on you. I'm not going. Now, if I had continued to see, abuse and neglect at some point, it would have to have gone above me. But I've always been able to get a church involved, get a charity involved, other things to get parents help. That's kind of where I'm at in this whole thing, is advocating for, like, how do we allow adults to do everything that adults want to do, and then still protect minors? That's really all I care about in this scenario. I don't think the government does a great job, so we need a different solution. And unfortunately, that solution is that we have to help. We have to help our community and the people, and we have to stand up when we see it. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I wish I had a better answer, but the only other answer
go ahead.
I mean, the only other answer is outsourcing it to a legislative body that would turn out would be a government. So
right. No, and I think that's, it's funny because, like, everyone says, it's the degeneration of society. You want legalized prostitution everywhere. And it's like in a way, degeneration of society is like, no, we've given up on caring about our own society and delegating the entire thing to the government, and just like trusting these politicians who, like, you can ask any American, do you trust politicians? And you'll never get a single yes. It's 100% unanimous. No, we don't trust politicians. But for some reason, we trust them with everything. Yeah, let's delegate all authority to them. Let them figure out the rules. Let them enforce the rules. Even if we don't agree with the rules, well, the rules are the rules. That's the law. And that's kind of what we've become. And I think that's like, that in itself is, I think, the degeneracy of society, not whether or not sex work is legal, because there we're taking no consideration. Yeah, here, we just got a comment for that right here. Sex work is for degenerates. It's like when it's just like, oh, I've been told that this is a bad thing, and so therefore it's a bad thing, like, without ever actually thinking about it. Like, what's the real harm in it? I mean, if it's all consenting adults, if nobody's being forced, what's the real harm in it? And if you've never asked that question and, like, actually thought about it and come up with an answer to it, what's the real problem with using drugs? And if you can't think about it and come up with an answer to it, it's like you've already kind of given up on society, and you're just being a brainwashed sheep running around regurgitating whatever laws you've been told are the laws. And that's just the way it is. And, well, if that's just the way it is, do you think that's the way it should be? Would you Would you be interested in changing it? No, 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 no. So it's not just the way it is, it's the way you support it for being. But but that's just your excuse, is to say that's just the way it is, because you don't understand it, and you can't back it up. And I think this is this is probably our society's biggest problem. Like, we're not free thinkers. We don't evaluate whether or not laws are just. We see juries all the time that are just like, oh yeah, well, the law says he's guilty, I guess he's guilty. And I think that's terrible. I think that's the biggest problem we have with regards to degeneracy.
I would agree with you. There's a couple points that I absolutely agree with you on that. I rail on my show all the time against people, and on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen it, that don't understand nuance, that don't understand that it's not a go team go mentality. And like libertarians it's almost like the left, to me, does not understand that they're in a cult. The right does, but they don't care. Libertarians seem to think that they're not in a cult, but they're in a cult of not caring. And it's like they've picked a team, and their team is just like Gen X, like that, like, we just don't care about anything, just do what you want, just leave me alone, which is fine. But then if you don't get involved some way, then other people are gonna, the other two sides are gonna decide how they think that these issues should be handled. And they both have an all or nothing mentality, so we have to kind of make a decision. The other thing is, and gosh, your audience is gonna hate me, and I kind of hate me for having to be a feminist for a minute, but because I'm not. But prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. And if it wasn't 90% women who were sex workers, then I think that it would be legal today. If men were making the reason why I think a lot of it's not legal is because men can easily use women in this way, and the men that are in charge of the women, because most of the pimping and most of that part of sex work comes from men. The managerial part seems to be men. So why would they want to change it? They're not having to pay taxes
Right.
on what they're doing, and they're also not the ones that are taking any of the risk in the job. So so on that end of it, let's just be honest. If it was the other way around, it would have already been legal a long time ago everywhere.
No, I mean, I think I might disagree with the why or the how that would happen, but I think I agree with if men were doing it, it would be legal. And it's kind of the same thing with weed, right? I mean, they say this all the time, and I don't know, it's I guess it's a little bit fabricated based on some things that cannot really be articulated. But they say, oh, well, now that white people are making money on weed, it's legal again. But I don't think that's even the case, because we do know the drug war was a racist war that was started, but we also know that there were plenty of white farmers who were growing hemp back in the day. So,
yeah, I mean, I disagree on that aspect, because I think that the reason why weed is now being legalized is because it's able to be taxed easily. And
well, I think it could have always been
family member who I don't want to dox, who is that's what their job is growing and selling weed. And everybody up in Humboldt County, California, these pot growers did not want this decriminalized. They did not want it legalized.
Right.
Why would they want to have to start paying taxes on their business? Right. I don't know. It seems like no, the government just found a way to tax it, where that's why some forms of sex work are legal and some aren't. That's why, as long as you put a camera in front of you, you can do as much sex work as you want, as long as you're streaming it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's not, pornography is legal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we
isn't that because of a more of a First Amendment issue, though?
that's
It's
guys, but also, you know, stripping is legal. It's like these weird, like,
right.
we have these weird,
Well,
like,
yeah, it's like, where do they draw the line? It's like, okay, we'll let you get naked, but like you can't actually have sex. Like it's
but
yeah,
they are
like
actually having sex like pornography
right.
is not just simulated sex. People are actually having sex. So we could just say, okay, I'm like, me having sex with a client is now an art installation at, you know, the Motel 6, like whatever. Like,
Right.
so it's like, it's just like weird, random, you know, ways that they could find to tax people. That's why I think we have a lot of the issue
Right.
with sex work. You know, there, none of it has to do with
Here we got another one.
protecting women and protecting children. Oh, here we go.
Right. So Dimitri's saying sex work is trash. Well, okay, fine. I mean, you know, opera is trash. I don't like opera, but I'm not running around saying, you know, we should ban opera music, or like going like, I mean, that's the thing.
I agree with Dimitri, but I don't want the government to be in charge of it.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and this is an interesting thing too. And like, you know, this is your point about nuance. Like, everybody thinks that because you know, someone advocates to legalize sex work, that what they're saying is every woman should be able, you should be able to go offer money to any woman and she has to perform sex for you, and like we want this degenerate society. And it's like, no, that's not it at all. Like, look at the other side of this. We don't want to, if you're really trying to protect these women, why do you want to throw them in jail? Like, that's like it's like, and what's crazy is like, when I was going on that whole like Twitter rampage of like posting all those tweets, like I was posting articles like that where it was like, oh, we're protecting all these sex trafficked women and throwing them in jail for their own protection and giving them criminal felony records for their own protection. And it's like, what?
So they can't get a job.
You're not helping them.
They have to go back to sex work.
Yeah, now they can't get a regular job.
Can I see? I'm looking at the comments. Dimitri saying you're manipulating what should be natural for profit. Simple as that. So are we talking about pot? Are we talking about people that sell firewood too? Are we talking about people that grow food? Should all of that have to be given away too? Lots of things are natural, like
right.
my hair color.
What is natural for profit mean? Because money itself is not natural. I mean,
I think he's saying you're manipulating what should be natural for a profit. And you could correct me if that's not what you meant, but why?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like, that's what I'm not. He is. But like, I'm like, a lot of things are natural. That doesn't mean people can't profit off of them.
So, okay. This is an interesting one. Prostitution destroys a woman's life. And okay, I want to say this, like, you can have, like, people make all kinds of mistakes that they regret throughout their life, right? So let's say you got a tattoo of like something, let's say you got like a Bernie Sanders tattoo, and then you're like, oh my God, I hate Bernie Sanders 5 years later, right? Oh my God, I wish I didn't get that tattoo. And I like have it like, you know, where it's on your arm and it's totally visible, or you have to wear long sleeve shirts even though it's hot as hell outside. Like, we make bad decisions, but it's like, to say this completely destroys somebody's life because they went and did something like this. I mean, what is it about it? Is it that they had sex, or that they accepted a little bit of money for it? Because there are plenty of women who are out there who are like, oh yeah, I'll have sex with you, you buy me dinner. Like, they're, you know, buy me some drinks, and, you know, turns into a one night stand, whatever. There are plenty of women out there who have sex with lots and lots of men, not for money at all, not for any kind of exchange, just because they enjoy sex. And it's like, we don't always, I mean, yes, there are plenty of people shaming them for that, but like, nobody ever like looks down on them as much as somebody who accepted money for it. And it's like, really, what is the big deal about it? I think too many people are like emotionally attached to like sex as like this like amazing, and I know for some people it is, but it's like they put like too much like emotional connection on it. Like, oh, I'm, you know, the people like, I'm gonna grow up, I'm gonna meet my wife, I'm gonna save myself till marriage and stuff like that. And it's like, if that's what you want to do, that's totally fine too. But I know people who have done that, and then they're like, man, I totally regret that. There were all these girls when I was younger that were totally coming on to me, and I should have like at least like, you know, experimented and tested the waters and all. Like, you can't go back. You can't go back in time. Now you're married. And it's like, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But like we all live our lives with different paths. And to say like because somebody did something voluntarily, like what is wrong with that?
We found the debate because I could not disagree with you any more than I do right now.
All right.
So here's the thing. There are some people that are like that. Most women do tend to have some emotional connection when they're having sex. It does wear down. There's documentary after documentary after documentary of ex-sex workers who have said it degraded their lives. Almost every girlfriend I have who was in, I don't know, sex work in some way, either prostitution, stripping, adult films, and amateurs, like live streaming. I don't know what they're called, like e-girls. I have a friend who's like a kind of like an e-girl. They all regret it, and they don't know each other. They're different women from different walks of life. They all like they didn't feel great about what they were doing. So I don't think that that's like that wouldn't be the cart I tied my horse to on that one. Because a lot of sex workers have a lot of regret. And I wanted to go back to that question that somebody brought up, where it said prostitution only destroys women's lives. To end it is a sign of society's both economic and moral maturity. So here's the thing. I'm not saying sex work is great. In fact, I think I've made it pretty clear. Like, I want it. I don't want it criminalized. Adults should do what they want. But yeah, I think it's bad. I think it's bad for women. I think it's bad for children. I think it's bad for men. I think it's bad for society in general. I think that about a lot of things. But I think that there's nuance in this. And I think that the actual solution is to make it so not feasible to go into sex work, to make it a thing that is not like there's people that tend to believe that if we legalize this, then all of a sudden people are going to be like, well, it's legal, so I guess that's fine. We all are fine with that now. And no, you can still say like, well, that is a bad decision. You've made a bad life choice right there. It doesn't mean I'm going to go and stop someone. All I'm saying is that we're going to have to probably have conversations with people that we love and care about that are in sex work if we don't want them to be in sex work, as opposed to calling the police on them and having them put in jail and have a record, and then they have to go back to sex work because they can't get a job. Because also the thing about sex work is it's addictive. I mean, if you're making tons of money for this short amount of time, for a while, you're able to kind of deaden how you feel inside if it is something that's problematic, because you have bills to pay, because you have children to take care of, because you would like to, eat and have a roof over your head. And if you could do this, make this amount of money in a short amount of time, it's very hard to be like, okay, I'm going to stop and go get a job at Denny's, or I'm going to become a clerical worker. That's what I think a lot of the reason why women keep going back to it and back to it. But to say like, oh, it doesn't destroy a lot of people, more people than not, it ends up destroying them emotionally for a long time. Are there people that it doesn't? Absolutely. Absolutely. Some people are perfectly fine with it. But everybody's different, right? We're all individuals. And it's not up to me or you or anyone else to tell another adult what's good or what's bad for them. We can try and talk to them. We can try as a society to make it so that it's like unthinkable to even go into that position, to even go into that career. But those are things that we don't have discussions about. We don't talk about that. We just say like, make it legal or make it illegal. Like, those are not the only two options. This is not like a binary situation. And we have to stop thinking that like, if we make it illegal, then our job is done because now every woman and child is safe and men are going to go home to their wives and not think about other women. And if we make it legal, then every woman is free to do what she wants, and nobody's going to try and molest a child ever again, because now all the women are legal to have sex with whoever they want for money. Like, that's not the way the world works. So in order for things to, in order for us to have a society where we have less prostitution, less child trafficking, less less child rape and molestation, and have it be as free as possible, we have to understand that there's nuance involved, and we have to find different solutions. And I can't say it enough. Like, you have to find a way to get involved if you want things to change, and in a way where everyone can be as free as possible and not get hurt. Sorry.
Right. And I think you said like a few interesting things. I mean, first of all, when you're talking about getting them help for something that's legal instead of putting them in jail, that totally sounds to me like when you have someone who's an alcoholic, a friend or family member, and you want to get them help, you don't call the police and say, "Oh, they're in a drunken rage again, throw them in prison." You say, "No, we're going to have an intervention." And you try to get them help. And I think that's a really interesting point. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where it's like, but it's so much easier just to pass a law, and like that's going to solve everything. And it's like that's not how it works. And I wonder if because if you were to just like walk down the street and like ask people, like, do you know someone who's an alcoholic? Pretty much everyone's probably going to say like, yeah, I know at least one person, right? Or at least maybe if they're not like an actual like admitted alcoholic, like who might have a drinking problem. But if you ask somebody like, how many sex workers do you know? A lot of people are like, well, I don't know anybody. My friends aren't into that, because it's a much smaller population than the number of drunks that we have in this country or in the world. And and I think that plays an interesting part of it, because like it kind of like, like like out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, right? Like when you don't have friends in that industry, it's like, okay, if they make it illegal, that's fine. I don't see it anywhere I go. I'm still not going to see it anywhere I go. Apparently there's a problem and they need a law so that they can fix the problem. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. And so they like justify in their head, yeah, just let them pass the law and do whatever they're going to do, because that doesn't affect me one bit if it's legal or not, except for like, I get to sleep better at night thinking I did the righteous thing, that kind of thing. And it's like, I think that's a huge part of it, like, into like whether or not people pay consideration to other people's lives. Like, well, I don't know anybody like that. I think that's like I think that's kind of a really interesting side to that.
Yeah. Somebody in the comments, and I'm so sorry I missed it, said if it was legalized, would there be any like ramifications around it? Can we talk about that for a little bit? Sorry.
Sure. Like, would you get like a slap on the wrist instead of jail time?
Well, I actually wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about like, I wouldn't want it to be legal or okay to like have giant billboards of, prostitutions. I just don't, it's like,
Well, I mean,
I think that it would be fair that communities should be able to vote whether, like,
sure.
brothels should be able to be in their neighborhood. So, because some people don't want, some people are hustlers and they are going to have 10, 12, 20 clients a day. And you know what, you do you, but some people don't want that coming in another neighborhood. Just like,
Right.
it's like,
Or at least not with a big neon sign on it.
yeah, I mean, like,
yeah, and there's different levels to that. And I mean, like, there's
are
like,
affecting other people because you're affecting their property value,
right.
things like that. So yeah, I think there should be some ramifications. Sorry if I just turned into a horrible statist. I'm not saying put anyone in jail for it, but yeah, like I don't want my neighbor being doing that because my kids, play on my street. Can we stop calling hookers sex workers?
I have a question for Justin. Do you know what the word hooker means? I think that's funny. Like I always words and language always kind of amuse me because like people use words that they don't really know what their meanings are, and so like I have a feeling somebody, because we know hooker is usually a degrading word used for sex workers.
Oh, I didn't think it was degrading. I just thought it was like.
I mean, it's like, when you want to, so yeah, you hooker, you whore, these are like, those are like kind of those words. It's like it's less PC than prostitute, I guess. But like, what's interesting is like, there's an actual, like, where that word comes from is like not really that derogatory. So it's like, because I mean, it sounds like the way this guy's asking the question, and you can comment if yeah, see, he's saying whore now. So the way he's asking the question, it's like, can we stop using nicer PC words towards prostitutes? Can we use like some really awful words to like make them feel bad about what they're doing?
Justin, if you want to, I don't want to.
I just think it's funny because if you look at the word hooker, it's like where it comes from, it's really just not that degrading at all. It's kind of become that because it's lost its original meaning, and I'll let everybody Google that and look it up. But it's like, yeah, it's interesting, but it's like, yeah, at the same time too, I mean, shit, I've been called so many words for being a libertarian or being associated with libertarians. I know I don't really call myself a libertarian, or an anarchist, or like all these, yeah, insults start coming eventually. And it's like, so what? That doesn't change my opinion. I mean, if the best you can do, if you don't like the things that I have to say or the things that I do, and the best you can do is come up with like, throwing some noises at me that make up a word and think like that's going to offend me and change my life's position on everything, it's like, you're just stupid. Sorry. It doesn't work like that. Come up with a better argument. Yeah. So, yeah, he's saying, same guy. He's saying bricklayer is an insult in some places. Yeah, I'm sure. And it's like, yeah, it's like, so I think the people who like use those kinds of insults, I mean, I think people who insult in general are just, like, what's the point of that? Are you like, especially like, here's another thing too. Like, so let's say you don't like what a sex worker is doing. How is insulting them going to like get them to change what they're doing, right? And like, this is even like, you have a next door neighbor who's always playing their music too loud, right? So you start throwing shit over the fence and like yelling, all kinds of swear words and everything at them. That's not going to get them to turn down their music. But if you walk over and say like, hey guys, you're having a party, I brought you some beers, hey, yeah, it's really cool that you're having a party, would you mind just turning the music down a little bit? They're probably going to turn the music down. Like, yeah. At least a little bit. Like, like there's this kind of natural thing that we do where we think like if we insult people and we respond with violence, and like maybe because that's how we see the government do it all the time. But of course we're not big armies by ourselves, so I guess it doesn't work. But it's like that doesn't change somebody. That makes them see you as, if anything, as a threat, and as someone who just doesn't understand them, and therefore somebody whose opinion really doesn't matter. So like, why are they even going to listen to you?
Yeah, I mean,
so Justin, step up your argument.
I didn't, yeah, I didn't know that like a hooker was even a derogatory. Like, I mean, I guess to me, I guess it would be the way you say it, because like, right. If I wouldn't have a problem with one of my being like, oh yeah, my friend's a hooker. Like, it's, to me it does, but I don't know. I think it's like with everything else. Some people are offended by it. Some people are not. But if I was like, oh yeah, she's a hooker, like, right. I think it's just all in how you say things. I don't know. Like now it's like, right. Let's say don't call, women prostitutes, or don't say it's prostitution. It's like we have to change, like, how our terminology is. Like, you don't. I don't. But if you're trying to change someone's mind, Yeah.
I was actually totally off topic, but kind of not. What was it? I don't know if I was watching something or or what, but it was talking about how like, um, so like, you know, the the evolution of the terms that you would call an African American person went from like, you know, one thing to like to Negro to African American, and like it was interesting that like the the times that that changed had to do with like important historical points where it's like, okay, our society has changed. We're going to be more inclusive of a group that's generally been like, you know, excluded through segregation or through slavery. And it's like, to mark like, okay, civil rights movement, like now they can vote. It's like we're going to use a different word for them. And it was kind of interesting, how there was that correlation. But at the same time, to, you know, to a lot of people, they still have like their bigotry and bias and everything. So it's like to them, it's like it doesn't matter. I'm going to still use the old word. And it's like to them, it's like they're holding on to the past of, you know, no, where this is, you know, where it's not acceptable to have them in your restaurant. Um, I think that's kind of interesting, and I'm not sure exactly how that relates to this because we kind of are going through that transformation now. I think and you know, maybe part of it is that we're using the term sex work, which is like I think a little bit more recent in general, especially now that there's like a growing movement for decriminalizing sex work. Or if that was just a word that was
We're gonna
just
have
like,
to not call it sex. Like, I'm not gonna listen. I, I think anybody that was watching this show is can gather like where you're coming from on this, where I'm coming from on this. I'm not big on like changing my terminology to like suit someone else. Like every single time someone changes their mind on how something is, like this is how I speak. I'm not being offensive. I'm not going to choose words that are deliberately offensive. I'm not going to call someone, I think Justin said whore. Like first of all, the only people I've ever called whores are my best friends. So like I use that as like a term of endearment. So, well, oh yeah, I saw Molly
right.
Ash in the comments. Molly, you uh we're not following each other on Twitter, but I see your tweets all the time. I think she ran for like she was going to run for mayor in New York or governor, something like that.
She ran
She did,
for,
right?
yeah, she,
Yeah.
I want to say she ran for sheriff.
Oh, maybe that's what it was. No, I know she ran for something in New York because I saw the tweets, and I don't know why we're not following each other, but I will have to find her after this.
Yeah, go follow her. She's awesome.
So
Um, yeah, and
yeah.
this goes back to nuance too. I want to bring this one up. So Justin says I'm comparing black people's struggle to hookers' struggle. No, actually, I'm not at all. I'm comparing the changes of society to the changes of language that we use as we go through them. I'm not comparing their struggles at all. But this is a nuance again that like you're distracted by one point of this conversation because you're like, you know, oh, like no, let's you're kind of like objectively trying to refuse to hear anything that we're saying because you've already made up your mind that sex work is disgusting. And so anything that we have to say about it that relates to how any other group was oppressed, you're basically just going to try to minimize it. And it's like, you know,
Oh,
yeah,
whoa, whoa. Can I stop for a second when he said, funny
yeah,
how I didn't mean it derogatory, but you attributed it to that motive? I'm going to call bullshit on you, Justin, because literally the way you meant it was derogatory. And then when we tried to clarify, then you said whore. And so to backpedal like that is a bitch move, dude. And I'm going to call you out on it. Like, you can pretend it wasn't. You can pretend that that wasn't your motive, but bullshit. Am I wrong in this? Like, do
no, I think
you
that's
think that
I think that's right. And like, well, but here's
yeah,
another thing too.
really,
Like,
you're gonna come
to
up
be
here. You're now gonna say that because his comment is funny how I didn't mean it derogatory, but you attributed to that motive. Bull fucking shit, you didn't, because when we tried to clarify, then you said whore. No, you did. Yeah. Someone, yeah, either you, someone else. So don't even, dude. Like,
nice.
sorry, go on.
So no. I don't know where to go with this. The straw man is calling us straw man. Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I see these things like all the time, and like, you know, people that have they have their minds closed, they have them made up on like, you know, all kinds of different. Oh, see, I asked ... whore.
Okay,
So
now he's playing dumb. Okay, you can feign ignorance now. Okay. Everybody in the chat and the 2 people on this show absolutely believe you. Our apologies.
Here, check this out. If you put it up on the screen, it's almost like Justin Douglas Scott, whore. Like that's his title. Sorry, bro, you set yourself up for that one. Yeah, it's this is always amazing to me because, like, okay, so one thing I always like to point out, and I want to point out here, like, I want to thank you for coming on the show and having this discussion with me, because, like, as you said, we had like our we had our disagreements. I think, like, because of having this conversation, like, there's definitely some new things I learned that changed my perspective. Anybody who claims to be an expert, I know there's a lot of people out there who know a lot of things, but even then, like, you know, experts are, you know, they've always got things to learn too. So I think these conversations are always really great to have. And, you know, especially with people with closed minds, if you can get them to open their minds just a little bit, because really, you know, these are the problems that are facing our society. And when you have a closed mind, when you have like all these, you know, these defenses you have against refusing to hear any argument against yours, any argument for why things should be different than the way that you like them, because you've already made up your mind, you're basically closing your mind to information and knowledge, which basically means you're forcing yourself to be stupid. So, you know, really have an open mind and have these discussions with people, you know, you might not agree with. And even though Britt and I think, agreed on a lot more than we disagreed on, you know, we still had disagreements. We still had some interesting conversations, and an awesome exchange. So, so thank you for joining on the show. I want to give you an opportunity, as I give any of my guests. I know you say you have your show. Let's go there.
Okay,
I want to give you an opportunity to plug your show and everything.
Some people, maybe no one, might know me from the Freckles and Brit show. Our last show was a couple weeks ago. We are coming back June 4th with the Fab show. It's going to be me. It's going to be Freckled Liberty. You guys have probably seen her on Twitter. And it's going to be Rachel Nix, who it's going to be a whole new type of situation, really fun, more type variety show. We're still going to be interviewing guests, but also sketches and a lot more comedy and things like that, because that's what we want to do. And awesome. So you can also find me on Twitter at Tweets by Brit. I'm also on Clubhouse at Salt by Brit, which the Fab show is going to be integrating Clubhouse into their new show. We're going to be having a Fab show club, and we're going to be doing talks so that we can actually have some of our guests in Clubhouse so that people can talk in real time. If you're not on Clubhouse, then get on it. You can go to Tweets by Brit on Twitter, and I'm giving away 5 invitations to Clubhouse. So you just can DM me and ask, you know, if you can get in on that, and I will be giving them away this Sunday.
I would totally go and get one of those, but I have an Android, and apparently Clubhouse is not on Android yet.
Not yet. I know they're.
But I went to, so if you do have an Android, don't test this, because if you go to the Android store, there's actually like 100 apps that look like Clubhouse. They look exactly the same. They have the stolen screenshots from iOS and everything. And it's like, it's not the app. Don't install it. It's scary. They have like, one of them has like 100,000 installs.
Oh my god!
Like, it's really crazy. Anyways, thank you again so much for coming on the show. Thank you everybody for tuning in. If you like what you heard, even if you didn't, go ahead and press like and share, and head over and subscribe. You can go to facebook.com/taxationistheft2 and subscribe there, or youtube.com/taxationistheft. And of course, head over to the awesome Taxation is Theft store, taxationistheft.info. And we have all kinds of really awesome swag and t-shirts and yeah, all kinds of really cool stuff. So go check it out. And until next time, taxation is theft. I'll see you guys.